Finally, we want to take a look a little bit about the principles and building blocks of transitioning to BGP from another protocol. This can be, number one, if you are dealing with an internet connection and you're going to establish a BGP relationship to a service provider. It's also true if you're implementing an MPLS network in place of, for instance, internet-based VPNs or something of that nature. I have stepped customers through a number of times in transitioning to BGP from some kind of an IGP involved in this type of a network. And then obviously, if you're connecting to another autonomous system and want to have that type of boundary. So we want to look a little bit about what it's going to be in a new or greenfield environment and then how to do it in an existing network. In a new network, here's the assumptions. Number one, a new network doesn't necessarily mean it's brand new from the ground up and it's the first time anything's been turned up. It could be that you're going from one service provider to another or one service type to another. For instance, back in the mists of time, there were a number of customers that were going from traditional frame relay hub and spoke networks to an IP-based MPLS network, and there was a lot of work that was involved in being able to transition that. Even though it was not necessarily a new network, there was a new connectivity that was being implemented. You might have, if that's the case, LAN addressing won't change. WAN addressing might. And there could be a number of protocols already in use. Static routing, EIGRP, OSPF, or even RIP might be in use to transition from those protocols to BGP. So in the transition process, if you have new equipment, by all means, use the new equipment with BGP, especially if there are new circuits involved. Just makes things a lot cleaner and easier all the way around. You can connect a little test network from the LAN side in order to be able to do some analysis to some maybe temporary IP addresses just to be able to verify things are working. Have the full configuration available for the day of transition. Make sure it's all spelled out. Schedule your outage window if you have that kind of a process at your company. And then configure just the border routers first with BGP and transition whatever others you might need to on schedule. Now, if it's just a single router that's going to be going to the new service provider environment and you're just going to be switching LAN connections over, that could be fairly simple. Then you just disconnect your old devices with the new ones, then execute your test plan, make sure your BGP tables are properly populated, the IP routing table is up, that you can reach the other networks that you're anticipating, and then certify the network as being fully functional. For an existing network, it's a little bit more sticky. The assumption is, number one, the existing equipment will host the BGP networks. There's not going to be any new circuits. The IP addressing is not going to change. There's essentially going to be a hot cut from whatever the previous protocol is to the BGP protocol. In which case, you need to make sure you know a number of critical elements. How are you handling autonomous systems and site partitioning? If it's a single network connecting to the internet, you know what your autonomous system number is or should be, that's fine. But if you're using it for MPLS, are you going to use one autonomous system number using AS override, or are you going to use different autonomous system numbers from the private range for all your sites? That's what I would recommend. But you need to make sure you know what it is. Know what your transition plan is. Know what your testing plan is. And always, always have a rollback plan in case the transition to the new network, something goes awry and you have to be able to reinstate the old. So when you want to transition to BGP in an existing network, the transition process has to be handled carefully. First, you can configure your eBGP routers with a higher administrative distance. I'm suggesting 224 because eBGP has a default administrative distance of 20, which will trump any other IGP that you're using, including EIGRP. So you want to have something set artificially high so that it's not going to create disruptions. Now, if it's an IBGP peer, then it's an administrative distance of 200, which isn't going to trump anything. So that's a little safer. But you always want to be able to manually configure these things. One of the things by having this higher administrative distance is you can go ahead and establish your BGP peering relationships. They can be up, they can be functioning, they're not going to impact the routing of your network. You may be able to use just some dummy IP addresses from a completely unused range just as sort of a test point, but once the neighbor relationships are up, everything's functioning, you're verifying the type of reachability that you want, then you can schedule your outage window, and then you can set the administrative distance back on your eBGP routers to 20 and on your IBGP routers to 200, or you could just leave them there as it is. Once everything's up, you've made the transition, everything seems to be functioning, make sure you are seeing all the BGP routes correctly. that you're able to have full reachability to all the other endpoints. And once that's done, then you can certify your network as fully transitioned and ready for service.